From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The federal government barrels toward a possible government shutdown at the end of the month as House Republicans fight among themselves about how to proceed. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnist Kim Strassel and editorial board member Kate Batchelder Odell. The fiscal year in Washington, D.C. ends on September 30th, so that means we are now only 12 days from a potential government shutdown, and no clarity, it seems to me, in Washington about how to avoid that, or if that can even be avoided at this point. Let's start with a couple clips. This is Kevin McCarthy on Fox News Sunday saying that a shutdown would only strengthen the other side.
A shutdown would only give strength to the Democrats. It would give the power to Biden. It wouldn't pay our troops. It wouldn't pay our border agents. More people would be coming across. I actually want to achieve something. I believe our best step forward, pass our appropriation bills so we're stronger. Take the wokeism out, secure our border to make America strong.
And here's Congressman Steve Womack of Arkansas arguing that the negotiations to avoid a shutdown are still in peril. This is him speaking on Monday.
The Republicans are trying to carry this water on their own. They have to have 218 out of a very fractured group, and you've already got a sufficient number of people right now on the record on social media saying they're not going to take it up or not going to support it. I question whether or not we can even get a rule passed on it, and that means that we're going to fool around here another week, accomplish absolutely nothing. All the while, the country is headed toward a shutdown, and the Senate is trying its best to at least present an appropriations package that can clear the Senate and maybe come over to the House and get some bipartisan votes.
Kim, from your view, where do we stand here a week and a half before this deadline, and where are you placing your odds as we tape this on Tuesday?
Well, let me just be clear. What Speaker McCarthy said is 100% correct. It's really the only and best path Republicans have for accomplishing some of what they want. And yet, that is not what we're seeing happen in Washington. You have conservatives in the House who are concerned about continuing resolutions, right? So this is a process by which you extend the deadline and funding from the last year. Maybe you do it for a month, maybe you do it for 2 months. And I understand their fear because where that has led us before is right up to the deadline of the end of the year. And finally, everybody passing everything in some horrid looking omnibus. They don't want to see that happen. And I get it. Yet these people who have insisted all along that we have regular order, that we pass regular appropriations bills instead of go down this CR process, they have completely torpedoed all the work in committees to get those regular appropriations bills out with infighting and stall votes. So the House has made almost no progress whatsoever on its regular appropriations bills. And while a 30-day continuing resolution would give them some more time to do that, the super conservatives in the House have decided that they're not even going to agree to a continuing resolution until they get yet more policy concessions. And so we have this sort of complex new CR that's been put together that doesn't simply extend funding. Instead, it has a bunch of other provisions in it. Republicans are now fighting over that. I think there's still a possibility it passes. Right now, there's efforts going on to bring around the last sort of half dozen people you need for Republicans to do this on their own. Although even if that happens, it's dead in the Senate. And so right now, it's very disturbing to say, but we do seem to be headed towards some sort of shutdown. And by the way, Republicans once again seem to forget that no matter what the circumstances, they will own that scenario in the media and they will be blasted for it.
Kate, what's your view of this? My understanding is that this continuing resolution proposal was negotiated between members of the Republican Main Street Caucus and members of the House Freedom Caucus. So it has a Freedom Caucus stamp of approval. There's a summary going around that says it includes a 7.8% cut to non-defense spending and some border riders specifically to help secure the southern border. Do you have a sense of what is in this continuing resolution and why, despite the fact that it was negotiated with the Freedom Caucus, it still seems to lack the votes to pass?
Yeah, Kyle, I mean, first of all, it's a goat rodeo and who knows where it ends. But on the question of what's in the CR, the continuing resolution, 30 days, I think it's pretty notable that it would cut non-defense discretionary spending by about 8%, and it would force those domestic agencies to take a deeper cut than the Pentagon. Democrats tend to demand parity, that every government agency must take an equal cut. So this would be something of an achievement if the House passed it, given that there is some spending restraint on the domestic side in it. It also, to Kim's point, includes several policy riders that Republicans say that they want. So I don't know where this ends. I agree with Kim that there's a chance that they still manage to get it through, and that would at least give them a starting point of negotiation with the Senate and make them look like they are in less of disarray than they are now. But I'll give you an example of why I'm not hopeful, and that is the appropriations bill for the Pentagon. So the House was trying to pass that last week and is going to take it up again and try to get it through this week. To Kim's point, it would be a huge achievement if the House got back to regular order and passed 12 spending bills. And that's what some of these conservatives say that they really want. Yet when this defense bill comes up, it becomes a hostage. And some of these same members have taken it hostage to extract more concessions on other spending priorities. And so this defense bill, the White House is threatening to veto it. So you're not going to get more Democrats on board to get it through. And so essentially, you can't even get what should be one of the easier appropriations bill. That's changed a little bit because of the politics of Ukraine. But you can't even get the second of 12 appropriations bills through. So look, this is just a self-defeating exercise. So that's why it's hard to tell where it goes from here or how they could manage to turn this failure and leverage it into something out of a government shutdown.
Well, goat rodeo is a good analogy. I'll cite a couple other ones. Here's a quote from Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska. He said some of these folks would vote against the Bible because there's not enough Jesus in it. And then another one that I thought was pretty good was Mike Simpson. He said, it seems like you always get some new people in that have got to touch the stove, which is kind of what is happening here. And Kim, let's talk a little bit about this idea of a shutdown. Some of these Republicans seem convinced that they could win the public argument over a government shutdown, but that is not my recollection of how this has played out in the past. And one thing to keep in mind is the exact contours of what a government shutdown looks like depends on who is running those government agencies and who is in the White House at the time. There are ways to try to exempt as important the services that people really rely on, or at least some of them. There are ways to make it as painful as possible for as many people as possible. And recall there was a government shutdown in 2013, and the Obama administration, the Park Service, closed the World War II memorial on the National Mall and barred entry to veterans who had come to Washington. And I suspect that that's the kind of tactic that we would see out of the Biden administration. They would say, listen, we have to fund the government. Republicans, this small faction of them, they control one portion of one side of 1/3 of the federal government. And they're to blame for this, essentially.
Correct. And Republicans are either not remembering that history or are living in some sort of alternate reality. Because here's reality. They only have one branch of Congress at the moment, okay? They don't run anything more than that. So they're not going to get their way on everything. Everything is going to have to be a negotiation, and it can't just demand. Here's another reality. Biden doesn't care if there's a shutdown. He is daring Republicans to do it. He would love them to do it because they will make it as painful as possible. It all sounds like fun and games for Republicans until suddenly there are all the headlines about how no one can go visit the national parks, or how there's a risk that senior citizens aren't going to get their Social Security checks, or until vital services somehow are not provided here or there. And Republicans will own that because even if they're not entirely to blame for this, the press will make sure that every headline says that they are indeed responsible. Here's the other reality. There is, by contrast, strength in numbers. And, this is what I don't understand, why they do not see the wisdom of what McCarthy has said. Right now, we're looking at those appropriations numbers and those appropriations bills. Okay, the Senate has actually followed the guidelines that were set out in the debt ceiling agreement. And so spending will be cut from what it was this year under those new bills. Republicans in the House, while they are still in a bit of disarray in terms of trying to get those bills through, they are attempting to cut even deeper than the levels that were set by the debt ceiling. Now, if you get those bills done at those lower levels and then you go into conference with the Senate, you can bring them down in a negotiation from what was agreed in the debt ceiling deal. That's how you get something done. Plus, you're going to have the opportunity to put your own policy writers in there instead of the ones that we're living under right now, which were all crafted by Nancy Pelosi Democrats. There is so much wisdom in putting their noses to the grindstone, finishing the regular appropriations process, buying themselves some time with a clean CR. And yet everybody just seems to think that if they hold their breath until they pass out, that maybe this situation will change.